Today, let's sew a bat scrunchie perfect for Halloween. Welcome, I do sewing and DIY related content, and today we are going to be making this cute bat scrunchie. So this starts off very similar to a normal scrunchie pattern, and then we are just going to be adding this little bat detail to the top. The best part is there is a full Etsy pattern available if you want more information, as well as the bat pattern itself. So to start off with, you are going to want some cotton fabric. This is going to be for the scrunchie. Now I will say this pattern is a little bit more on the intermediate side, especially when it comes to that bat portion. So if you are a beginner and still want to cut this out, I would recommend having some felt material as well. Next, when you get the pattern from Etsy, you will see that there is a pattern piece for a bat. So I have cut this so that it is opening up so that you can see what it fully looks like, but in that Etsy pattern download, you will just have half the bat, and we are going to be cutting out our fabric on the fold. That way, when you open it, very similar to how I did this piece of paper, you will get that full bat shape and it will be symmetrical. So you can either cut out this bat using cotton material, or if you're more of a beginner, again, highly recommend doing this in felt. Next, for the scrunchie, you will need some sort of elastic. I highly recommend a 1/4 inch thick elastic. You could get away though with something a little bit thicker, such as a 1/2 inch. And then you will want some pins as well as a safety pin. Safety pins are super helpful when it comes to making scrunchies, as they help with turning the elastic as well as help turning the scrunchie tube itself. So if you have a safety pin on hand, I would definitely use that. Then you are going to want some fabric shears. So once you have all of your supplies together, you can go ahead and get started. So we are going to start with our fabric and first cutting out our scrunchie itself. So for this, you can do really any size that you would like. I recommend a good middle of the road scrunchie is about 3.5 inches wide by 18 inches long. You could definitely make this bigger or smaller depending on what type of scrunchie you are going for. Once you have that cut out, as you see, your fabric is going to have a right side and a wrong side. The right side is the colorful side, so for mine with the bats, and then the wrong side is the back of the material. Next, you are going to want to cut out your elastic. This is just going to be like a 7-inch piece of elastic. If you want it bigger or smaller, you could vary it. And now we are going to work on cutting out our bat. So you're going to be taking your pattern that you got off Etsy, which again will just be half of a bat, and you're going to be folding your fabric so that there is a fold along one edge. So as you can see here, I'm now going to match up my pattern piece, that short edge that is nice and straight, with the fold of my fabric, and I'm going to pin this in place. Now if you're using felt, you're going to follow the exact same instructions for this and be cutting out one bat. If you are using cotton, you want to cut out 2 bat pieces. And again, all of this is listed on my pattern in case you want this written in more detailed instructions so you can follow step by step versus a video. Once you have it all pinned up though, you're going to go ahead and cut this out very carefully. So as you can see, there's lots of little curves on it, and this really is more of a pattern of patience than anything, just because there are some detailed steps. So as you can see here, I'm just going through making sure I have it all nice and cut out, and then I'm going to remove the pins, and since I am using cotton material, I am going to cut out a second bat. This is what it looks like though when you open it up. It looks really cute and very spooky, and it is ready now to be put to the side, and I'm going to cut out the second bat. But if you are just using felt, you only need to cut out one. So if you're using cotton, another item that you can do, this is more optional step though, is to add interfacing to help it stand up a little bit more. So cotton on itself can sometimes get a little floppy, so the interfacing will just help it be a little sturdier. So I'm cutting it out the exact same way as I cut out the fabric, so doing it on the fold so that I get that one continuous bat piece. And then once I have this all cut out, I will then be able to attach it to my fabric following the manufacturer's instructions. If you're using felt though, you do not need to do this step. This is just an optional step if you want to make your cotton be a little sturdier. So now that I have this all cut out, it's now time to start working on our scrunchie. So I'm going to take the scrunchie tube material and I'm going to fold it with right sides together along that long edge, so hot dog style if that makes sense to you. And I am just going to be pinning this all the way up. So as you can see, I put my first pin about 1.5 inches away from the edge, and I'm going to do that for both edges. And I'm going to sew between the pins. So I'm going to leave about 1.5 inch gap on either side, and this is going to allow us to create our scrunchie tube. So when I go over to my sewing machine, I'm just using a regular presser foot. I'm going to be using a straight stitch. I am not changing any of the other settings. We're just going to be taking a straight stitch for all of this. And as you can see, I have my scrunchie tube on my sewing machine, and I have started about 1.5 inches away from the edge of my material. And I'm just going to take a straight stitch all the way down. I am going to backstitch at the beginning and end to make sure that it's nice and secure, and then I am just going to sew this as I would any normal stitch so that I can have it be nice and sewn up. Once this is done and I get to the end, I am going to stop early, making sure that I have about 1.5 inches at either edge so that I can put together my scrunchie tube. Now to put together the tube, I need to turn this first right side out. So I'm going to take my safety pin and I'm going to attach it to where the fold is in my fabric, and then I'm going to push the safety pin into the tube itself. And why I'm doing this is it's going to allow us to very easily turn our fabric right side out, and then I'm just going to use my hands to adjust the safety pin, push it down the tube, and then I can adjust the fabric on the other end so that it folds in on itself. And then I can do this the entire time until I have my scrunchie tube nice and ready to be turned right side out. And then I can take the safety pin off and just get everything laying nice and flat. Now what's time to do is bring the two short ends of our scrunchie tube together and sew these up. So as you can see, at the moment they are kind of curled because we made that tube shape. So this is going to be sewing a straight line on a curve. So to do this, I'm going to be matching up the right sides together of one edge of the scrunchie tube with another edge of the scrunchie tube. And I'm going to pin this all the way around, and I'll show you in a second a more zoomed in view just so you can see what this looks like. But once I have it all pinned, I'm just going to take a straight seam along that edge. So as you can see here, I have the right sides of both those short edges of my fabric are now pinned together, and I'm going to bring this over to my sewing machine and take a straight stitch. So I have my sewing machine, I have it on the presser foot, so everything is lined up, and I'm going to just take a straight stitch all the way around. Now with this, you may start to notice your fabric can bulge a little bit at the bottom. There may be some folding. You really want to make sure it's nice and smooth. So when you start with that straight line, back stitch, and then you're just going to continue sewing all the way through. Now I really try to use my fingers to make sure that the fabric is laying flat, and I can also tell if there's any bulging that's happening or if I'm getting some fabric that I don't mean to be getting. So I just do this all the way around, and then once I finish, I back stitch it, and then this is what your tube looks like. So now you'll have the completed scrunchie tube that now we just need to add elastic to. So adding elastic is really simple. You're going to take your elastic, and then you're going to take your safety pin again, and you're going to add that safety pin to one edge of your elastic, and then you are going to just guide this through your scrunchie. So wherever that hole was in your scrunchie that we just created, you're going to go through and just push your elastic all the way through. Be careful while you're doing this to notice how much of a tail you have on the other edge of the elastic though, as you don't want it to get stuck in the scrunchie then having to redo all of this. When you get to a point where you only have a little bit of the elastic left on one edge, I like to pin this in place just so that I can continue adding the elastic into my scrunchie without having to worry about keeping track of that other end of the elastic. Because as you kind of go through and push the elastic all the way through, you are going to need to bring those two ends of the elastic together. So as you can see here, I have that edge that had my safety pin on it, and then I have the other edge, and now I'm going to pin these together so that I can take a straight seam across to attach them. So now when it comes time to sewing these, what we're going to be doing is taking multiple straight stitches to make sure it's nice and secure. So on my sewing machine, I have my elastic now in place. I'm just going to be sewing back and forth about 6 or 7 times. Now sometimes the elastic can get stuck in your sewing machine, it can accidentally get brought down. There's lots of different ways that you can try to prevent this. First, you can try to go very, very slowly when you're doing these stitches. Next, I like to add some elastic on the right as well as the left side of the presser foot. I feel like this just gives it more room and it helps it not get sucked into the sewing machine, the bobbin portion. And then the third option you could do is see that little black button on the side of your presser foot. You can try to press that to help your presser foot be more level to go over the elastic multiple times. If none of these work, I definitely recommend just trying to start over and take your time to sew the elastic through. It can be a challenge, especially if you're not used to sewing elastic though, but you will be able to sew, 5 or 6 straight seams all the way through, being sure to backstitch so that you get that nice and secure stitch across your elastic. So here's what mine looks like. It looks really good. I'm happy with how it turned out. And then you can just kind of bring all of this elastic back into your scrunchie. At this point, your scrunchie is almost complete. So now what it's time to do is work on our bat. So if you're adding interfacing to your cotton fabric, we need to add that to the fabric now. If you are using just felt to do this, you can skip all of these steps. So the first step though is I'm going to press everything out nice and flat and smooth so I can make sure that when I attach my interfacing to one of these pieces, I don't have to worry about any wrinkles in the fabric. Next, I am going to apply my interfacing following the manufacturer's instructions to the wrong side of my fabric. If you're using fusible interfacing, you should be able to feel that one side kind of feels bumpy versus a smooth side. The bumpy side is the side that you want to attach to your fabric. So now that I have that done, it is now time to start working on sewing up our bats. So to do this, I'm going to put both of those pieces of the bat with right sides together. So as you can see here, the right sides of my fabric pieces are connected, and I'm going to pin this all the way around. So this portion of the project is really where patience comes into play and why I am considering this to be more of an intermediate level pattern. As you can see, there's lots of little details we're going to be sewing on this bat. And on one edge, you will want to mark that that's going to be where you're stopping and where you are starting. So I like to do one of the tips of the bats. So up on that right edge, I'm going to be starting and stopping there, making sure that I leave a gap. Now I'm going to take a very narrow seam, probably like a little bit less than 1/4 of an inch, all the way around, closer to probably 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, so that I can make sure that I'm getting as much fabric so it's easier to turn, but also getting all of those details. So if you're a new sewer or this is something that you haven't done before, this could be a little annoying to go through and just making sure that you get it all done, which is why I highly recommend it. You can just use felt and skip all of these steps and still get that cute bat scrunchie. Once you have it all sewn up though, and you have that gap opening, so you can see on mine it's in the upper left corner that time, you're just going to go through and trim any corners, any extra fabric, any extra strings you have, as this will make it a lot easier to turn right side out. In addition, you can clip any curves so that it makes it easier when you are turning this, that it won't be as bulky and it will lay hopefully nice and smooth for you. Once you do this, it is then time to just start turning this right side out. And you're going to use that opening, that gap that you had earlier, and just very carefully work your fabric through. As you can see, as we did for the sewing, there were a lot of little details with this. So you really want to take your time and just very carefully push the fabric through to turn it right side out. I know there's turning tools that you can get. I know that you could definitely use a pencil. I just used my fingers, and then when it did come time for those little details, I actually got a pin and just very carefully sort of like massage my fabric out. So you can see I've gotten a couple of those corners done. And what I do with this is I just find wherever that corner is going to be, or that point, and just very carefully push the fabric using the pin. I find this helps a lot, and then you don't have to have an extra tool to do it, but you do want to use caution as it can sometimes tear into your fabric. And after you just did all that work, you don't want to have to worry about having your fabric ruined. Once you have this done though, and you continue working all of your way through it, it is now time to close off that little edge. So to close off this edge, I just folded the fabric in on itself, and then I pinned this all up so that it would be very easy to then just take a seam. So very similar to how you may just close up any little applique that you've done. And then I did decide to press all of this so that it would be nice and flat and smooth, and I wouldn't have to worry about it. So I found that pressing it out really helped when it came time to top stitching, as you didn't have to worry about, like if it was going to lay correctly. It just made everything be a lot easier. Now when it comes time to doing that top stitching, as you see we're going to now, we're going to take a very narrow seam allowance, probably like 1/8 of an inch, and this is just going to allow you to have that detail, really make sure that the bat stands out, while also kind of closing off that one edge that we still needed to finish off. I found this wasn't too difficult, especially if you had already sewn up the bat in the first place. You just had to very carefully go around, sew everything in place, and then you got a really nice clean looking bat. So with this done, it was then time to just trim off any little strings that you had, and we can now attach it to our scrunchie. So now we're going to go back to our scrunchie to finish this off, as we still have that one hole from where we had added the elastic. So to do this, we're going to fold in those edges of the fabric, very similar to how we did our bat, and I'm going to pin this up and then I'm going to stitch it. Now to sew it closed, you could either use a hand needle, or you definitely could use your sewing machine as well. I find that hand stitching it can make it look a little bit nicer, just because you don't see the seam, but there's nothing wrong with using your sewing machine. Since it is more of like that flat stitch, you'll be able to do it easily as well. I just went through though, closed this up so that then I would be able to attach my bat piece to the scrunchie itself. When you're going through sewing it, if you are hand sewing, be sure that you're knotting it at the beginning and end. It's very similar to how you would back stitch it, just so that you really have a nice and secure stitch. Once you have that complete though, at this point your scrunchie is done. So again, everything for the scrunchie is very similar. You could follow these steps for any scrunchie that you wanted to make. But now it is time to add our bat. So if you used only a piece of felt, this is where you would join back up with the video for where we're going to be adding our bat. If you did use the cotton bat like I did, we are going to be sewing that onto our scrunchie. So wherever that seam was for where we attached those two pieces of the scrunchie tube together, that's where I sewed my bat on. You could definitely sew it wherever you would like to though. And basically you're just going to be attaching the back of the bat to the fabric itself. So I used a hand stitch to do this. If you'd wanted to, you could use a machine and just, take a straight stitch down the middle, and that would attach your bat on as well. But I found this to be very simple, just to go through sewing it using a needle and thread, being sure you knot it at the beginning and end so that it is nice and secure on there. Once that is done though, and you cut off the extra strings, your bat scrunchie is now complete. This is what mine looks like. I absolutely love it. I think it turned out really cute and really fun. Again, there is an Etsy pattern up where you can get this bat pattern piece, and you can get all these instructions included in both for inches as well as centimeters. I love it. I also think it could be really fun. You could add some beading to it. You could definitely use different kinds of fabric for this, and I think it's perfect for Halloween. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know what you want to see next. Thanks for watching.